We're going to be continuing our study in the 14th book of Yisrayl, part 1. And this evening we're going to be in chapter 4. And the pastor, he titled this, I like the title. The title that he put here, it really sums up everything that he talks about in this particular sermon. It's called "The Concoctions of Sickness, Diseases, and Murders are the result of the concoctions of sins in this generation." I mean, I think we've all heard the term concoctions, many different times. But have you ever, I like looking up words just to get a little bit better understanding of what they mean. And when I did that, I understood why Pastor used this word twice, because a word actually has two different meanings. The one meaning means to concoct, means to prepare by combining raw materials. So by combining two different things, you'd come up with a mixture. And as we go forth in the study this evening, we're going to see just what it is. But it's the concoctions of sickness. It's what causes. Think about it as we go through this evening. It's what causes the concoctions of sickness, disease, and murders. What is it that combined to make these things? And of course, it's the result of the concoctions of sin in this generation. Now, there's another meaning to the word concoction as well. And it also means to devise. It also means to fabricate. To fabricate also means, fabricate means what? It means to make something up. Well, devise, when you follow the word devise, and we can see how this, how this develops. But to devise, if you remember what's written in Jeremiah 23, 26 through 27. And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase it here, but it says, "How long will it be in the prophets who prophesy lies?" And the prophet says, yes, they are the prophets of the deceit of their own minds. And then what do? They devise, they plan, they scheme, they plot. And that's what devise means. And what were they doing? They were causing the people to forget my name, to forget Yahweh's name for Baal or for Baal or for Lord. What has the entire world done today? They've forgotten Yahweh's name. They don't know Yahweh's name. And this was one of the plots, this was one of the plans, a secret plans, because that's what a plot is. A plot is to plan secretly to do something usually illegal or harmful. To devise means to secretly, or to plot means to plan secretly to do something usually illegal or harmful. And if you remember what Pastor said, remember how he brought out, I think it was during the feast that he brought out, why deception was allowed. Why did Satan deceive Eve? Because Satan couldn't create the microorganisms herself to bring mankind down. So what did she do? She tricked mankind. She deceived mankind, separated mankind. She was able to deceive them, to separate them from Yahweh so that she could teach them the lie to be like the gods. To have this mixture of righteousness and evil, to have this concoction of righteousness and evil. And what it did is it created the merging, the sin, the concoction of sin, the mixture of that righteousness and evil. It brought forth the sickness, disease. It brought forth all of these things. And Satan deceived mankind to do it to themselves. It's pretty amazing when you think about how she did this, and it snowballed over the past 6,000 years. And sin is about to reach its peak, and Satan's whole thing that she's trying to do is to destroy mankind. She's really seeking to destroy this house and this work, but Yahweh says that this work and this house will not be allowed to be put into the grave again. But it is going to survive, and you got to remember, we have to trust in Yahweh. Remember, Yahweh is in complete control, as Pastor's dream that he had pointed out. And, what Yahweh is doing is he's developing a priesthood to rule as Yahweh rules, to make the choices, to be perfectly righteous. And that's what Yahweh is building. He's building a family of priests through training that comes forth from here at Abel to live in unity with him, and they will actually live to be with him in unity forever, ever. 100% in unity, as Pastor shows here in verse 4 here, a priesthood that he could prove, and we're being proved daily through the tests and the trials that we go through, and how we handle them. Do we fail? Do we stumble? Do we fall? Well, yeah, we do. But what do? Do we just give up and say, it isn't worth it, I can't do it anymore? No. What do we have to do? We have to get up and keep moving forward and learn from that. And it's the patient persistence in doing righteousness that Yahweh wants to see. Our determination to be 100% in unity with him and with our pastor and overseer. That's what we're striving to do so that we can take on this perfect righteous character. So the microorganisms that are out here that make us up, that make up us, that surround us, as we learned about that biocloud that surrounds each and every one of us, so that they can learn to trust us as they did Yeshua and as they trust Yahweh. This is what Yahweh is building. This is what is being built in us through the trials and the tribulations that we're going through. And we are going to be 100% in unity. Those who make it will be 100% in unity with Yahweh and never allow sin ever again to take in and take shape like it's taking now. That is ultimately what is going to take place. Because of iniquity that is doing away with the laws of Yahweh, the sin has taken a big leap, and it's abounding in these last days. Knowledge has increased. The love of the many will grow cold. Knowledge is increased, as we're going to see, and iniquity will abound because of this. Well, iniquity is abounding because of the increase in knowledge. Back in I say the old days, but back in days before my time, back in pastors' early days, they didn't have the worldly entertainment as easily as it was now. You think about how easy it is right now. I remember one sermon that Pastor gave, said, how Solomon had all of these entertainers coming in from all over the world. They would come in and entertain. And Pastor made the comment, he says, we've got a bunch of little Solomons running around here right now because of this little box called a TV and this little thing here that we can have in our hand called a remote. Nope, don't want that one, don't want that one. Oh, there we go. So you could have that entertainment right at your fingertips. So yes, we have all of these things to overcome, and it's all kinds of entertainment. And what is it doing? It's not building our minds, that's for sure. It's not building our minds in righteousness. It's enforcing and increasing that mixture of righteousness and evil. It's increasing, making that mixture, making that just that much more solid in our minds when we allow these things. But Pastor, he shows here, he shows here in verse 5, he shows here about, in 1987, he brought out about the STDs were mixing with the genes of mankind, and they're actually changing the genes. And he shows in verse 6 that then there are these kingdoms of bacteria that actually stay dormant in your body for years. Remember this concoction. Remember this mixture of mankind and animal. These things, that's how these things are able to take hold in mankind, is because they have part man in them. So they can actually be they can actually become part of the body. That's how they're actually able to kind of disguise themselves. And this is what they're saying here. Pastor shows here, he says there's kingdoms of these bacteria that actually stay dormant in your body for years. I know somebody that was diagnosed with cancer here several years ago, and this is what they were told. The doctor got down and looked this person in the eyes, and they said, now, what I'm getting ready to tell you is going to sound totally crazy. Said, but these type of cancers, they hide in your body. And then they come out and do damage, and then they'll go hide somewhere else. Pastor had brought that out several months before then, and it was, the situation wasn't funny, but it was kind of funny that the doctors were confirming exactly what Pastor told them to go look for. And this is what he's saying, and he's actually directing the scientists to go look for these things, and he's telling them where to look. And we see that as we get further in here. But he shows here how they hide in your body. They raise young and they live there until your body is weakened to the point that they know they can move out and take the army that's fighting another battle somewhere else in your body. Then they can take over your body. He says it's that simple. And then he shows here in verse 8, he shows how, the truth be known, and the truth is what we've brought upon ourselves is, and what we contribute to each time that we sin. Think about that. Every time that we break the law of Yahweh, every time that we commit sin, we're contributing. We contribute to these things. That's the reason we've got to stop sinning totally, because you contribute to the curse. You contribute to it. We've got a ready-mixed concoction floating around in the heavens. And remember when the true cause of global warming, when Pastor wrote about that, people laughed at him. They told him he was crazy. They said, well, this is a bunch of hogwash, if you want to call it that. And then lo and behold, a few years later, what are they doing? What are the scientists doing? They've confirmed exactly what Pastor said was in the firmament. And that, man, should really increase. That should increase our trust in Yahweh, because this is fulfilled prophecy. These are fulfilled teachings. And it should increase our trust and fully understand and realize that, yes, Yahweh is in complete control of everything that's going on. And we have nothing to fear. As long as we do what Yahweh instructs us to do, as long as we follow the example of our pastor and overseer. Our firmament, he says here, you're breathing it. It's in our water supply. It's in the food. Remember what Pastor brought out about E. coli. E. coli, they said, used to be able to wash it off. Well, you can't wash it off the plants anymore because it's gone into the root system. It's now part of the plant. That's how these things are taking over. That's how these things are, as Pastor puts here kind of loosely, he says they're evolving, they're changing. And then he says, now we have weather extremes everywhere we look. And he mentions about gonorrhea, how gonorrhea acquires a piece of DNA. And he reiterates it. He says, gonorrhea, an STD, actually acquired man's DNA. And he said, now it's where it can take a bite out of your DNA and make it part of itself. Now, that same gonorrhea, now they're saying, is drug resistant, which means it's kin to every one of those things they're using to fight it. It's kin to mankind. It says, it's resistant. It's resistant. There's things that aren't working against it anymore. Oh, let's see here. And Pastor, he continues down here in verse 11. He says, we've generated in our bodies from all of this sin, and it's piling up the sins, and we have generated bacteria that take our DNA or take a dog's DNA and gets into your body and mixes it. That's what we're facing here, and the scientists are calling it evolution. And he says, you're seeing it, and it's evolving, and these things are actually in the air. They're in the atmosphere. They're in the firmament. And then in verse 14, he talks about this article here. He says, the first evidence of gene transfer from a human host to bacterial pathogen offers a new view of evolution. And Pastor says here, he says, and the scientists are just now finding this out. About this direct transfer from DNA has never been recorded from humans to bacteria. That's when this article was written. But Pastor warned us that this was going to take place. He warned us for years that it would take place. Now, this same bacteria enters a dog, it enters cats, it enters everything on the earth, pigs, you name it. And, of course, it enters the waters, the oceans, it enters the atmosphere. It's latching onto everything, and it latches onto everything, and it rapes it, he says. And, of course, it makes it a part of it. It makes it part of your body when it gets into your body. And he says, this has become stronger now, and it's resistant to everything on the market. Talking about, of course, this bacterial, this gonorrhea. It's become stronger now, and it's resistant to everything on the market. And we don't have anything to cope with it now, and meaning it's kin to everything on the market. You can't take your defense from your body if it's part of your body. You won't be able to fight against it because it's part of it. And the way Pastor's describing this here kind of reminds me of a war, a war tactic that that has been taking place for several years. Everybody ever heard the term of guerrilla warfare? Now, guerrilla, I'm not talking about the monkey. It's not Gorilla. I had to look this one up too. But it's guerrilla, Guerrilla. And what that is, and the way that these bacteria, the way that they're operating, the way that they're doing this, reminds me of this guerrilla warfare. But a guerrilla is a person who engages in irregular warfare, as if there's such thing as regular warfare. But irregular warfare as a member of an independent unit carrying out harassment and sabotage. And their tactics when they do this, and one of the things that they're doing is the people who are involved in this guerrilla warfare, they're unidentifiable because they don't wear uniforms. What do? They wear regular clothing to blend in with the crowd. And so you cannot distinguish. You can't distinguish between somebody who's part of a village and somebody within that village, or is this person infiltrated the village and are they part of the resistance, or are they part of this this group who is engaging in this warfare and just hiding here? Well, this is what these bacteria, this is what these things are doing when they take on part of the DNA of the human DNA. This is one of the ways that they're actually able to hide, because the body doesn't really recognize them as something that's foreign, because, well, it's got part of the body in it. So you can see how this mixture has really contributed to this here. And part of these guerrilla tactics are they use surprise raids. Remember how they hide and they come out to do their damage, and then they go back into hiding? The same thing a guerrilla fighter would do. They use surprise raids, sabotage by small mobile groups of irregular forces operating in enemy territory, and that's actually that's what that definition is of guerrilla or guerrilla warfare, and how that operates. But this is how this gonorrhea does. It actually steals DNA from humans, and it steals their DNA and then uses it to attack them. Okay, so you can kind of see the similarity there in the tactics on how it works. Now, the thing about this is, and then Pastor in verse 23 here, and then he goes into the children dealing with violent rage. And he shows here, it tells a story of a boy 18 months old who goes into rages. He bites on things, he hits them with fists, and he tries to destroy. He tears up rags with his teeth. And what does it sound like to you, pastors ask the question. What does that sound like to you? Does that sound like a person? No, it doesn't sound like a person. He says, he shows a picture of him, and he says he's fine looking. You couldn't see it from looking at him. They put him in his room, and he tears it up. He tears up his bedding, his clothing, and he goes into rages, like a bulldog, he says. And then he says, are you getting the point, scientists? He's telling the scientists what to look for, where to look. Are you getting the point? I just read what causes this, what's causing it. Now look deeper, and you'll see the brain is infested with whatever. And they're seeing this more and more now. There was an article that it was back on November 11th, fairly recent. Did anybody hear about the 8-year-old boy that was being charged with murder at 8 years old? There was an 8-year-old boy who was being charged with murder because he beat a 1-year-old baby to death. Get this now, after he was left at home alone with 5 other children. He was the oldest. This 8-year-old was the oldest. After he was left home alone with 5 other children, after the mothers of both children went partying at a nightclub. That was the reason they left them at home. And you know why the boy beat the child to death? Because she wouldn't quit crying. That's not normal. Inflicting harm and hurt on people is not a normal thought process. It's an infection, and it's confusion. It's this concoction of sin. It's what has been put into the minds of the people through these illicit acts. And then he goes to show, Pastor shows out that there's more than 50 kids under 13 prosecuted. That's 50 children over 50 children aged 13 or less been prosecuted for attacking their parents in London. And so Pastor points out this is not a United States thing. It's not isolated to one corner of the globe. It's a global thing. It's global. It's all over. And, he shows here, and again, he's pointing this out to the scientists, and he says, well, you're seeing the results of it. Back to the DNA grabbing bacteria, hint at an early phase of evolution. And he says, Pastor shows, he says, this is what you're seeing the results of. He says, if you would look just a little bit deeper, you're seeing the results of this in people now. And then, he points out, he says, animals don't rape animals unless they're forced or led to do so by ignorant, stupid people. You don't see that in animals. Unless, like Pastor shows here, unless they're forced to or they're led to. He says people rape, and he says, and the things that come from people, they also rape. And the scientists know this, and we've seen the video of the one cell, how it invaded the other one, how it raped the other cell. And he shows here, he says, and this is where you're getting the crosses. This is where you're getting the buildup of the things you can't fight against. We have nothing to fight against it. It's all a mixture, a big mixture of sin, a concoction, a witch's concoction. And then of course, we've talked about already about the pieces of DNA that are floating around in the firmament. These sins, remember, have shown that they've reached into the heavens. It's out there and it's floating around. And the bacteria are actually, they can actually absorb these snippets of DNA that float around in the environment. Bacteria can access a junk shop of genetic material and feed it back to us, Pastor shows here. He says, oh boy, what a world, what we've brought upon ourselves. And that's absolutely correct. Mankind has brought these things upon themselves through their acts of the rejection of the law of Yahweh, through this lawlessness, that was brought about by Satan, to devise, she plotted, she planned secretly to convince mankind to do something illegal, which was to become like the gods, to partake of this mixture of righteousness and evil. And then Pastor, he continues here, he shows here, he said, astronomer Carl Sagan once said, and he says, no, they just quoted him, a ready mix of bacterial pathogenomics, human DNA sequences within a bacterial metagenome, that of the obligate human pathogen, Neisseria gonorrhea, that's that gonorrhea bacteria. But the most exciting scientific reports are those that overturn one's assumptions and force one to realize that there are more things in heaven and earth than we ever dreamt. And he was making allusion, he was alluding to, this mixture, this bacteria, this DNA that's in the firmament. And then he talks about Adam Lanza. You remember who Adam Lanza was? He was the one that gunned down 20, I think it was like 20 children ages 5 to 10 back in 2012, December 2012, at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And he killed 20 children and I think it was like 6 adults. They don't have the answers. Pastor shows here, he says they have no answers. They were showing here what Adam Lanza's mom did, which was picking up all the sharp objects and putting them in a Tupperware box and hiding them, so he couldn't get them because she had been threatened by him with these things before. And Pastor goes to show you, he says nothing really helps. He says they have no answers. They're groping in the dark for the answers, but they have none. And then Pastor, he brings out the holidays. We're the holiday season. The so-called pagan, the pagan holiday season is rapidly upon us. And we got a slew of things that are getting ready to start taking place over the next few months. You've got Thanksgiving. You got Thanksgiving next week, and then you've got Christmas a few weeks after that. Then you're going to have New Year's, and we're going to have what Pastor talks about here about Valentine's Day. Now, what would Valentine's Day have to do with these killings? And then he goes to point out the meaning, the deeper meaning behind Valentine's Day, and it has nothing to do with love, but it's about fertility rights. It's about the ancient fertility rites that don't. It's not promotion of love, but it's promotion of illegal lust. And it's the illegal lust that has brought about this concoction, this concoction of sin, the concoction of this sickness and disease. And these things are being taught daily to the children. Being taught daily. Their teachings surround, they surround these pagan holidays. There's absolutely nothing righteous about those holidays whatsoever. And eventually, what is going to take place here? Pastor shows he says that. Let me see here. He says these rites are given to the God worshippers like Eve in Genesis chapter 3. He says this is the early start of where sin started, Genesis 3. Most people don't even understand what they're looking at there when it says you will be like gods if you sin. You will be like the gods, taking on that God-like character, knowing righteousness and evil. He says you won't be like Yahweh, but you'll be like the gods. And of course, if you're like the gods, then you will be destroyed. It will come to pass that in the last days that 4/5 of you will be destroyed. You'll destroy 4/5 of your population. You will, from what you're practicing. Pastor's showing that it's being brought upon by mankind. Mankind is bringing these things upon themselves through the things that they're doing. Yahweh is sending out a warning to mankind. He's sending out a warning right now, and Yahweh has always sent out a warning. Prior to a great destruction, the warning has always gone out. And Pastor shows how this spread, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. In verse 39 over here, it says, well, the way of iniquity bounded, of course, was the knowledge was increased. They got the computer to where they could bring forth television, also the internet. And he says the internet was invented in 1934. Did you know that? That's how we're reaching the world. And remember, Satan uses the internet and television and all of these things to try to destroy mankind, to push out her deception, to push out this concoction that she is pushing forth in an effort to destroy mankind and in an effort to destroy this work of Yahweh, to prove Yahweh wrong. Well, Yahweh is proving her wrong, because Yahweh is bringing out of this worst time of trouble a group of people who are learning to be just like Yahweh himself, and who are learning these things and are going to actually be teaching this remnant, this roughly 2 billion people that are going to come out of this great tribulation to be just like Yahweh. And this is what is taking place right now. It's going forth through the television, through the computer, through the internet. And if you remember what Yahweh, and I just kind of want to close with this here real quick. If you remember when Yosef was taken, what Yosef's brothers did to him in Egypt. They tried to destroy him. They wanted him out of the picture. They threw him in a cistern, and then they sold him into slavery. And then, to make a long story short, when Yosef and his brothers were reunited, they were afraid, remember? Because of what they feared that Yosef was going to do for them. And Yosef, he made a statement. And he said, what you intended to do to me was to bring harm, but Yahweh turned that right around and used it as a blessing. And so the very things that are being brought about right now to bring harm to this world through the television, through the internet, Yahweh is turning it right around to be a blessing to all of mankind. So with that, may Yahweh be with you and bless you. And if everyone will please stand, I'm going to turn the class over to the great Kaham Matithya Hawkins.
As Shabbat Shalom, great men in Yahweh, you may be seated. We're going to continue on where Great Khan Pariah had left off here. And again, just to rehearse where we're at, we are in the 14th book of Yisrayl, part 1, which is Sin Never Again. And we're in chapter 4. This is the sermon Pastor gave on February 15th, 2014. And this is chapter 4, the concoctions of sin, or the concoctions of sickness, diseases, and murders are the result of the concoctions of sins in this generation. Okay, and we're going to continue on here, cover cover these verses here, starting off here on about page 45 and 46, mainly on 46, but we'll go back a little bit to 45. Let's read this article Pastor's showing here that actually shows the mutation and how what Yahweh warned years ago. We see science is now actually showing that these things are true, and we know that Yahweh showed these things in the Scriptures when He said, and we'll read here for your notes in Leviticus chapter 18. And this is just one example where Yahweh said here in Leviticus 18, verse 29, and this is Leviticus 18 is talking about unlawful relationships, and unlawful sexual acts. And Yahweh says here in Leviticus 18:29, "For whoever shall commit any of these abominations, that the person who commits them shall be cut off from among his people." And the side note G8 there says that Yahweh will allow them to be stricken with some deadly plague. And this is what Yahweh showed us way, way back before science even had the microscope. Remember the microscope and the ability to actually see what science can see today was unable to be done by these prophets and by the inspired writings here that was given from Yahweh. These things were given as instructions from Yahweh because Yahweh created us, and He knew what was beneficial for us and what would occur if we turned from that which He told us to follow. And now we see science here is actually starting to back up these scriptures showing the concoctions of sins in this generation. And it's the concoctions of sickness, disease, and murders that are a result of the concoction of sin. And picking up here, we're going to pick up, I'm just going back to verse 40 on page 45 quickly here. Pastor's showing about this article right here was sent to him by T&T Plumbing. That's Truth and Truth. It used to be Truth and Prophecy Lane. If you remember the House of Yahweh, where now the press room is 1025 TMP Lane, Truth and Prophecy Lane. Well, it's T&T Plumbing is Truth and Truth Plumbing Company. And Truth and Truth Plumbing Company, in this article, it says, Japanese professor says, "I won't eat any seafood. I've changed my entire diet, refuses to buy any fisheries product from any market anywhere in the country after bringing detector to store and learning actual radiation levels." It scared him really bad, in fact, Pastor says. He said he's moving from there. Pastor says, I could tell him it's as bad anywhere else. It's equally as bad anywhere else as it is there, but these are things you're going to have to deal with now. This is all a part of sin. The only reason I'm bringing this is to show you the whole bundle of wax here that we're looking at, that we're facing. Nervous system tumors. This article goes on page 46 of our 14th book of Yisrayl, verse 42. It says, nervous system tumors, it says, a change in cognitive abilities, ability to perceive, reason, and remember. So your cognitive abilities are your mental functions, your ability to perceive, reason, and remember. A change in it. There's a change in it. There becomes a change in the ability to perceive, reason, and remember. These things are caused by general confusion, it's also called. And they're caused by a tumor that's caused by a virus. This is that confusion that Yahweh showed there in Leviticus chapter 18, that when you commit these things, it causes confusion and perversion. And this is this general confusion Pastor's talking about. They're caused by a tumor that's caused by a virus, an STD. These are what viruses are. They're STDs that are actually able to enter the person's brain because of bacteria, not just bacteria. All of these things are capable. If you just look closely, you'll find out they're capable of taking on DNA of mankind. That's the reason Yahweh says, don't do this. Don't partake of it. And you think, nothing occurred to me. I sinned and I got away with it. Nothing occurred. You're a fool. It's like Yeshua said, you're a fool for thinking you even got away with it. And this is what we have to guard against, because as Pastor's shown us, the microorganisms have the ability to protect us. Remember, the great Khan Ali and I brought it out in one of the sermons there, I don't know if it was last feast or the feast before, about, if when you practice in righteousness, you actually have the ability to overcome even if you accidentally did something. But don't be a fool and thinking, well, I accidentally did something, so so I can go purposely do it, because sometimes we do find out maybe something that we've ingested wasn't beneficial for our body and had unbeneficial properties. Well, Yahweh has the ability to allow these things to pass through us and cause no harm. When we do find out about them, of course, we should go seek and beg for forgiveness to Yahweh, and also through confessions and asking for forgiveness or partaking of anything that might be unclean. But we know there's many things that Pastor's been warning us against. We're not talking about things that are snuck in, natural flavors and things that get snuck in. We're talking about actually going and turning and being like a fool, like Yeshua said, for going and partaking of this world and thinking nothing occurred to me. I sinned and I got away with it. Okay, because these viruses are capable of taking on DNA of mankind. All right, and that's the reason Yahweh says don't sin. Okay, because when you sin, you cause this process. Remember, as Yahweh showed in Genesis chapter 3, that dying you would die. In Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3, dying you would die. Okay, I remember the Hebrew for you shall surely die is dying you will die. It starts a process, the beginning of process that actually starts to break down your body. So no, you need to guard, we all need to guard against partaking of any kind of sin, and don't think for a minute that you can go against what is taught here at Yahweh's house, okay, and have any kind of protection. Because when you step outside of that protection, remember the shadow of protection is the teachings and the instructions we receive in these last days. When you step outside of that, and many have tried, people used to try to maybe find a cheaper way to produce something, and they actually ended up bringing death to themselves. Pastor's taking great effort in making sure that we have all the blessings of having, an abundance of food. We could have just come here and he'd say, well, we're going to have water bread and water gravy, and you're just going to have to deal with it because mankind's confused and defiled the food supply. Okay? But no, Pastor's taking great efforts, okay, and done many, many years of hard work to make sure that we can actually have some of the best, actually some of the greatest foods, things that we would never even experience had we had not come to Yahweh's house, with some of these different animals and such that we get to partake of. But all these things are to bless us and benefit us. No, we can't, stack our trays and become gluttons. Many things are out of budget maybe, but we do get blessed with these things. And even if you don't think you're eating a lot of beef, we know Yahweh always blesses us. That roast beef last Sabbath was wonderful. It was a great blessing for us. But don't think you can go out and get grade AAA Black Angus at the store and think it's not going to harm your body, because these things will harm your body. And there's been many fools, as Pastor said right here, verse 42, you're a fool. It's like Yeshua said, you're a fool for even thinking you got away with it. Okay, because you go and put these things into your body, you actually start changing your DNA, you actually start these tumors to breeding and building in these families of these viruses. These things actually, before you know it, they create tumors in your brains. Well, in verse 43, it says, a change in cognitive abilities, ability to perceive, reason, and remember, and a wide range of neurological abnormalities, depending on where in the brain the tumor is located. You have no control, Pastor says. You can't reach in there and pull it out. Most of the time, the doctors couldn't operate. If they did, you'd get blood clots all throughout your brain, and your brain would be worse, and you go into whatever before you died, and maybe kill the doctor even. Okay? Although they try to make it, I even noticed that last week they were talking about the guy that had the tapeworm in his brain, and they pulled it out. They make it look like, no big deal. Eat pork, you get a tapeworm, you go to the doctor, and he'll save you. Well, he's a rare statistic. Okay, because many other people eat these same unclean foods and they die quickly. Okay, because the likelihood of getting a worm, an alive parasite out of your brain is slim to none. Okay, it's very slim. And that's what Pastor said right here. Your brain would be worse, and you'd go into whatever before you died and maybe even kill the doctor even. Nervous system tumors, this article continues to say. Those who have nervous system tumors, these change, including difficulty remembering things, changes in personality or mood, lack of initiative, and poor judgment. Depending on where the tumor is located, it may be difficult for some folks to engage in abstract reasoning. All right, and as Pastor told us before, don't start thinking, oh man, my brain, I haven't been remembering things. Man, I just got a tumor in my brain. Don't start going off and thinking these things, okay? Now, I'm sure we have a lot of defilement within us, but as long as we're cleansing and striving to follow everything that we've been taught here at Yahweh's house, we're going to be able to live and witness to seeing these prophecies come into pass. And these articles here are showing why what we see in the news is taking place. As the Khan spoke before about the lack of compassion and morality, even in the young children, 8 years old. Difficult for you to reason with. They get to the point to where their brain is not working, so you can't reason with this child who's chewed up his bed like a bulldog. Verse 45, Pastor says, it may be difficult, he's continuing to read this article from this Japanese professor, it may be difficult for some folks to engage in abstract reasoning, and some people may not be able to make decisions. Many people with brain tumors suffer from sleep disorders. Have trouble sleeping, toss around in bed and can't sleep, sleep disorders and restlessness. These are little things, the little symptoms that come from this. Now, Pastor says, remember where it started. Yahweh said, guard and keep this way or this is going to come upon you. Well, Yahweh saved the best to last, the last generation, because he wouldn't allow knowledge to increase to bring forth abundance of sin. Because mankind in his ignorance and his lustful rebellion, he took the knowledge and brought forth nuclear. And of course, he took that knowledge and brought forth other things like pesticides. They're also made of STDs. Anything they can use to fight certain things, they'll use it. Yes, it has STDs, it has bacteria, it has viruses that attack certain things. That's what pesticides are. There's something that they use to kill other bugs. But now continuing on and reading this article here in verse 48, it says, bacteria and parasites are viruses. These infections can be passed on to the fetus or newborn. And then in verse 49, it says, some infections that can seriously endanger the health of a developing fetus or newborn cause few or no symptoms in a pregnant woman. At first, Pastor says, and he talks about chlamydia about years ago when he was showing about chlamydia. Okay, and these doctors, even these 5 doctors who were in the house at that time, none of them heard of chlamydia. Okay, and Pastor was talking about how, back then it was a new god come up, but he was showing about how it would travel and actually pass on to the young children from the mothers partaking in this unlawful lifestyle and putting these bacteria into their bodies. But these new gods, they come up. And chlamydia infection is a sexually transmitted disease, STD. Got that? Okay. In verse 52, to go on to this other virus here, cytomegalovirus, a member of the herpes virus family. Remember, herpes is a STD, is transmitted through infected blood and saliva. That is kisses. Kisses. The world started that with the movies. That is the unholy kisses. Infection or infected blood, saliva and urine, which they're pouring into the lakes now. You knew that, right? They're so-called recycling the water, and they're saying, well, we can get up to 97% out of it, out of the water. So you only be drinking 3%. 3%. That should make everyone sleep better at night. And they're actually doing this right here in a little town like Abelin, okay, where they actually are taking the sewage waste, okay, which years ago, it's not like they've been throwing this stuff away for years, and now all of a sudden they come up with this bright idea. They used to just treat it and then pump it into the creeks and the streams, all right, and eventually it would find its way back to the lake. But, in their reasoning and senseless minds that are darkened, they thought, well, it cleanses some because it goes through the creeks and the sun hits it and stuff, so it cleans it up. By the time it gets to the lake, no one ever tastes it, right? Well, now they're actually taking the wastewater right up here in Abelin, outside of Abelin, Hamby wastewater treatment plant. They're recycling it and they're pumping it right straight back into the lake, okay? So they're taking this nasty water, mixing it with water that's, probably some of the cleaner water on the face of the earth. It comes from the rain and, all the clay that they have up there at their lake that cleanses the lake. But they're actually pumping, and right here it says you only be drinking 3% of it. Okay, but we know recycling the water can only get up to 97% of the infected blood, saliva, and urine out. So the world would only be drinking 3%. I don't know about you guys, but anytime I get anything dirty in my water, I pour out the whole glass, clean out the glass, and get some fresh water, I don't want even a slight percent of something nasty in my drinking water. Well, we see mankind here is not Their reasoning isn't, it's very darkened, so they're kind of like, oh, great, woohoo, we're going to survive the drought. We don't have to keep Yahweh's laws, it don't have to rain, and we're still going to be able to drink and swim in our pools and all these other things. And I just saw just the other day they were talking about the same thing, about actually getting a wastewater treatment plant by Possum Kingdom Lake, because I guess, out there everyone's just using septic systems, and that's all water they could use for their drought relief. Well, there's no relief for the curses that are coming upon mankind. We see this, that the concoctions of the sins in this generation have no relief. Okay? Yahweh commanded that they turn from these sins, or they were going to experience these curses, and we see them experiencing these curses. And only here at Yahweh's house, we actually understand, as Pastor said last Sabbath, we actually understanding why these things are taking place. But continuing this article, it says, inflected blood, saliva, urine, or other bodily fluids, and this is in verse 54, page 47. It's called CMV for short, which is the cytomegalovirus. It is a common infection, very common now, and in babies also. It comes with the baby comes with the virus. Newborns who have contracted CMV in the womb may have no initial symptoms, but over the first few years of life, the infection has been associated with problems with growth and development or signs of brain damage. And this is chlamydia. This comes from chlamydia and other viruses, of course, Pastor says. And conjunctivitis can be caused by viruses. How? Because they've got all their DNAs together now. We're fighting a battle that we can't win here. Can't be caused, or let me start back there. Conjunctivitis can be caused by viruses, bacteria, and allergies. And then continuing on here on page 48, herpes virus family is a group of viruses that can store themselves permanently in the body. Permanently in the body, okay? They're not able to get rid of these viruses. They can mask symptoms, put Band-Aids on problems, do some liposuction and some facelifts and make something look a little better. But the people are dying. They're getting old and they're dying, okay? And mankind's life expectancy is dropping by the day. And of course, we think nothing of it, or we used to think nothing of it, but now we see they're combined with other viruses, even STDs, even HIV, even AIDS. Now, we're going to jump down here to verse 63. And Pastor says, this is what we've cooked up for ourselves. And he's talking about the world here. At Yahweh's house, we're striving to come away from this defilement. That's why we're so strict in living a clean and healthy lifestyle and eating clean and acceptable foods and practicing clean relationships and doing those things which are commanded in the Scriptures, because we don't want to be a part of this concoction that the world's cooked up. But Pastor said that's what the world's cooked up for themselves. But that's not all, but we'll end with that one because he wants to talk about this Tiffany Kafleek in this story. This was a local lady here who just got sentenced. This was back in last year. She just got sentenced to 30 years in prison. That really solved the problem, didn't it? For all of Abelin, they show how brilliant they were, and the jurors they picked and the judges they chose in no sensible decision. The juries didn't even know what they were doing or why they should do it or what they were trying to do. The jurors said, I think a lot of other people should have been involved in this trial. So the truth was never brought out. What caused this woman to do this thing? Well, it's taking place throughout the world right now, Pastor says. She neglected her child. Why? She's been trained to. Started out with Valentine's. That's her training. Hollywood. The Hollywood movie stars taught her what to do. Of course they did. They taught her what comes first in your life. What are your priorities? Go out and have fun, the Pope said. Go out and experience the men, the Pope said. Bring your babies to us. We'll take care of them. Well, of course, it's this rebellion that we're seeing throughout the earth. Okay, so you can see here, and this was just one small example here of this lady, Tiffany Kafleek, here in Abelin, who got 30 years in prison for child abuse. But you see here, there's a system of uneducating. Okay, it's a system of uneducating where the Pope sets people's priorities. What are their priorities? The Pope said, go out and have fun. Go out and experience the men. Bring your babies to us. We'll take care of them. And they say the same thing to the boys. Go experience the girls. Go and have fun. Children should be able to have fun and enjoy, all the diseases that come with fun. Well, we know why the Pope's backing these things. Not only is he being inspired by Satan to destroy mankind, but they make billions and billions of dollars off of these uneducated individuals creating and breeding and mutating diseases, and then they need a pill so they can mask the symptoms so they can continue to live. And they also make money off of these adopting and taking children from homes. They make big money. It's a big, big, big industry. Instead of teaching people, how to train and to nurture and to have mercy and compassion, nope, just go and have fun. What are their priorities? The Pope said, go out and have fun. Go and experience the men. Bring your babies to us. We'll take care of them. All right? And this is the difference between Yahweh's system and the system of the gods here. Okay? Yahweh's teaching us through the Peaceful Solution. Remember the number one positive character trait in almost every Peaceful Solution book? Educated. To be educated. You have to get all the facts before you make a decision. You have to get all the facts. You have to educate yourself to be able to make proper decisions. Not just go do something because it looks fun or someone told you it's fun or, those guys are laughing and they did it. That doesn't make it fun. You got to educate yourself. You got to actually search out what it is that you're looking at here to find out, is this really fun? And this is what they market. Hollywood markets to the youth that this way of life is enjoyable, but they rarely, if ever, talk about the end results. Okay, they kind of mask those things, But these people are miserable. Even these Hollywood gods are very miserable. And they're the ones that are always in and out of drug rehabilitation and all these things because they're miserable. There's no satisfaction in their life. They've gained all the riches in the world, and then just as the proverb says, they just come to lose their life. But here in Isaiah chapter 24, Pastor says, if you turn over to Isaiah 24, in Isaiah 24, Yahweh says he allows the earth to become empty. Why is he allowing this? Why is he allowing babies to suffer? And this is what they sometimes will say on the news, why would God, if God was so loving, why would he allow this to occur to this baby or whatever? They want to have the blessings and they don't want to keep the laws, right? Okay, but we know, why is Yahweh allowing? Why is he allowing children to kill their parents? Why is he allowing the United States to go over to the other nations like Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq, and places like this and murder millions of people? Why is he allowing this today? Yahweh, in verse 67 on page 49, here's the answer. Yahweh gave them the way to peace, joy, love, and health. He gave everyone this. The Peaceful Solution Character Education Program was made available, and they rejected it. So Yahweh said, in order to bring forth a kingdom that will stop this in the universe, I will have to allow them to experience sin and what it will bring. And I'll put the earth here as a movie theater for the universe to watch and see. And I call heaven and earth to watch this movie that I'm putting on here. And out of this confused situation, I will bring forth a son without sin. He's capable of doing that. Okay, so Yahweh's allowing mankind to go their own way. That's why we see, babies suffering, children killing their parents, nations going and invading other countries, murdering millions of people, because those people are not under Yahweh's control. He's not judging those people. He's not judging the world, okay? Yahweh is allowing mankind to go their way, allowing Satan to, try and prove her point, okay, which she doesn't know that in proving her point, she actually proves Yahweh's point. But Yahweh's actually showing here to heaven and earth that this is what occurs when you turn from these perfect righteous laws. You have to keep these perfect righteous laws, and if you don't, then you're going to have these murders, these diseases, this hatred, these children with confused minds. So Yahweh said, in order to bring forth a kingdom that will stop sin in the universe, I will have to allow them to experience it and what it will bring. Okay, so this is a great... I guess Yahweh's the best documentary filmmaker. He's creating a huge documentary right here. Okay, this beautiful picture that's being put together is going to be shown to the entire universe for all eternity. Okay, to heavens and to the earth for all those who are going to come and be resurrected and those who are going to be born after. That this is what takes place when you don't want to keep Yahweh's laws. This is what takes place when you think there's a better way. This is what takes place when your priorities are going out and having fun. Don't worry about righteousness. Just have fun. Just do what's right in your own eyes. Well, we know this is not Yahweh's way. Yahweh's way is to educate your children. Remember Deuteronomy 6, verse 7? And you must teach them diligently to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk on the road and when you lie down and when you rise up. A constant training must take place. We have to be setting this example, men. Even like Pastor said, if we don't have children, there's others who have children. We need to set this example where we're constantly standing for Yahweh's laws of righteousness and not allowing worldliness or worldly entertainment or, the foolishness of the world to actually creep in and be made to look desirable, because these things aren't desirable. These things bring great misery and pain, and if you haven't experienced it in your own life, you might see it in other people's life, but it's a very sad and sickening thing to see the end result, okay, because the end result is very nasty, and it's not that just people just die like they hit a freight train and bam, lights out. These tumors spread and they cause great pain and suffering, and before these people die, they usually beg to die because it's so intense and horrible, and then that should be nothing that we ever find any joy in. So anytime you think the world's offering something enjoyable, you need to kind of re-picture it in your mind that it's not enjoyable. These things are the end. This is what brings this end result of suffering and misery and death. Yahweh brings true joy. And we see here in Isaiah 24 verse 2, and it will be with the people, so with the priest. And it will be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his owner, as with the maid, so with her mistress. It's going to involve everyone. The land will be utterly emptied and utterly plundered, for it has come to pass that this judgment has been pronounced. The earth mourns and fades away. The world mourns and fades away, and the haughty people of the earth languish. This is how they're doing it. By the buildup of sin in this generation, everybody is suffering something right now. It could take your life. It could drive you crazy. You could grab a gun and start killing your mother and daddy or whatever. And this is what can take place when you step outside of Yahweh's protection. You think there's a better way than Yahweh's way, and there's a better way than what's coming forth from Yahweh's house in these last days. It actually could drive you crazy. You could take a gun and start killing your mother and daddy or whatever, or go run out on the highway and run into a car or run out in front of a freight train and get ran over. But by the buildup of sin in this generation, everybody is suffering something right now. And we suffer these things. We suffer certain things so that we can actually be a witness against what sin brings. That's why it's so important. Pastor continues to rehearse and find things for us to continue to cleanse our bodies, cleanse our minds, and continue to build up our bodies and our immune systems, because these sicknesses and diseases that are being spread right now in the world, they're deadly. What used to just be a common flu kills thousands of people a year nowadays. But in closing here, if we go over here to page 51, and Pastor's talking here in verse 82 and 83 about the rabbis and the lords, and they created different gods like Jesus, and Jesus changed the laws, and so we don't got to keep these old laws of this evil, vengeful God. We're going to have new worship, Valentine, and fertility rites, and Easter, and Christmas. Pastor says, of course, it's all a lie in verse 83. It's all a lie. The world is full of one big lie. That's the religions. And Yahweh said, in the last days I will establish my house, and it will take the message of the kingdom to the world, which turns the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. Which one do you want? A world where the children hate their parents and want to kill them, or where there's love between parents and children? What a blessing. Praise Yahweh. And you gotta ask yourself that. Which one do you want? A world where the children hate their parents and want to kill them, or there's love between parents and children? We can see this this concoction of confusion even in the news here. They're trying to place blame on a specific group of people, but we see that these people are just as confused as the children in this country, just as confused as the children in those other countries. The confusion has no limits. It spreads through the entire world, okay? And they're doing things which they think are right in their own confused minds. In closing here, though, I want to encourage you, men, by reading here what Yeshua said in Yachanan chapter 5. This is when Yeshua healed a man on the Sabbath day, and he was, accused of breaking the Sabbath. He told the man to take up his bed and walk, and they told him, you can't be doing this. It's a Sabbath day. It's not lawful for you to carry your bed. In Matthew 5:14, Yeshua found him in the sacred precincts of the house of Yahweh, and he said to him, behold, you are healed. Sin no more, or a worse thing will come upon you. Okay? And we got to remember this, men, not to allow ourselves to be drugged back into sin. We're going through... We're about to go through some great testing as the gods descend on earth here for their great God days. And we can't allow ourselves to be drugged back into the sin, or a worse thing will come upon us. Continue to stand firm for the teachings of the House of Yahweh and the teachings of Yisrayl Hawkins. May Yahweh bless your evening, men.